Her daughter-in-law tried to list her sapphire ring before she was even dead. Irene Collier, 74, former librarian and full legal owner of the house, didn't say a word. By the next sunrise, Megan's resale app was flagged, and her IP address was logged. The safe was already empty. The deed was already sold. The trust had a firewall. They thought she was soft, but she just built a legal trap no one would crawl out of. We're about to begin, but if you'd like, share where you're joining from. It reminds me this story doesn't echo into silence. It lands somewhere real. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The hardwood was waxed too smooth. Irene's socked foot slipped as she turned from the counter, and in one cruel instant, gravity punished her age. The china bowl shattered first. Then her hip hit, her elbow skidded, and the side of her head met the dining chair leg with a dull, bone-deep thud. She blinked twice, cold wood against her cheek. The low buzz of voices in the kitchen. "Oh my God." Megan's voice cut through, shrill and amused. Did she fall? Daryl's loafers padded to the doorway. "She's fine. She does that sometimes, Daryl." Irene's voice was faint, tight with pain. "Help me." He scratched his head, uncertain. "You okay down there, Ma?" She tripped over the rug again, Megan said, not moving an inch. Her manicured nails clicked against the countertop as she picked up a spoonful of strawberry glaze. "Told you we should have moved those earrings before she fell on them. Now they're probably scratched." Irene swallowed, air scraping her throat like old sandpaper. A sharp pain pulsed at her hip. But louder than the pain was the sound of them, arguing about jewelry as if she weren't splayed on the floor like dropped laundry. "Megan, what the hell?" Ava's voice cracked through the moment like glass underfoot. Rushed steps, then warm hands, Ava's gripping her under the arms, gently lifting, eyes wild with disbelief. "Grandma, are you hurt?" "I'm all right," Irene said, though her voice trembled. Ava's gaze flicked toward her parents, seething. "She was calling you." "She was groaning," Megan muttered. "Not exactly Morse code." Irene steadied herself against Ava's shoulder, rising slowly as her bones protested. The room spun once, then settled. She looked at her son. Daryl avoided her eyes, instead rearranging napkins on the table like it mattered. Megan, in a fitted white blouse and pearls, dabbed glaze onto a cupcake with surgical precision. "The party's at 4, she said without looking up. "Don't want your face all bruised in the background photos." Ava stood there stunned. "Go rest, Grandma," she said softly. "I'll handle this." Irene nodded, drawing in a slow breath. "I'm not broken," she said, meeting Megan's eyes across the kitchen. "Just adjusting." Megan smirked and turned away. Irene moved carefully to the stairs, each step measured, one hand gripping the banister. Her hip throbbed, but her thoughts were sharper than the pain, not just from the fall, but from what came after. They hadn't rushed to help. They hadn't worried. They had watched and laughed. That night, after the guests had gone and the kitchen had returned to its usual curated silence, Irene stood in her dimly lit bedroom. Moonlight spilled across her floral comforter, and a sliver of wind pressed against the window pane like a whisper. She moved to her armoire. The large safe was still hidden behind the false drawer, the one they knew about, the one Megan had asked her to review jointly someday. Irene turned the dial with calm fingers and opened it, revealing birth certificates, an old pearl brooch, and a stack of insurance files. She reached past them and removed the small satin pouch sewn into the back lining. Her hands didn't shake, not even once. Inside was the real safe. Steel gray, compact, fingerprint-coated, untouched, unnoticed, a time capsule no one else had even seen. She placed it gently on the bed, then sat beside it and stared. They thought her soft. They thought her frail. They thought that age meant surrender. She reached for the reading lamp and flicked it on. Its warm circle of light caught the faint etchings on the metal lid, tiny scratches from years of careful use. She ran her fingers across the surface and smiled, not out of happiness, but of certainty. Not broken, just adjusting. She pressed her thumb to the sensor. The lock clicked open with a soft snick. Inside, a single folder. neatly labeled. The contents were the blueprint of a storm she had waited too long to unleash. And she had just decided. The wait was over. The second safe clicked open with a whisper, too quiet for the kind of secrets it held. Irene's fingers moved with practiced care, unfolding crisp legal papers that still smelled faintly of toner and dust, like time itself had been documented and sealed away. There, in thick print on the topmost sheet, it read Collier Residence, sole title holder, Irene Margaret Collier. Not Daryl, not Megan, just her. She let the paper settle in her lap, her hand resting lightly on the embossed seal. They could catalog earrings and bracelets all day long, but what they didn't know was that the crown jewel wasn't in a velvet box. It was the deed beneath their entitled feet. Downstairs, Megan was humming, that fake sing-song voice she always used when she knew people were watching. Probably frosting more cupcakes for Ava's graduation brunch, the one she'd somehow made about herself. Irene folded the papers, returned them to the safe, and closed it with a soft but definitive clunk. She stood slowly, bones protesting from the fall the day before. Her hips still ached, but it didn't feel like damage anymore. It felt like fuel. A knock came at the back door, light, rhythmic. She opened it to find Cora West, her neighbor of 30 years, standing with a thermos in one hand and a manila envelope in the other. Her cardigan was buttoned wrong again, but her eyes missed nothing. Cora stepped inside without waiting for invitation. How many bruises this time? Irene arched a brow. Only one that shows. Cora gave her a tight nod, the kind that carried decades of unsaid things. You called. Irene held up the envelope. Documents. The house is mine. Not that Megan knows it. She's always operated like squatters' rights apply to narcissists. She thinks caretaker means deed holder. Cora said dryly. It's about to mean nothing. They sat at the dining table, Irene sliding a packet toward Cora. I need Raymond. Cora took out her phone and dialed. You're not backing down this time. I'm not crawling anymore. Within 15 minutes, Raymond Lynn's voice drifted calmly through the speaker. Irene, he greeted, always formal but never cold. I assume you've made a decision. I want the trust revised. Fully. Ava becomes secondary trustee. You remain executor. Not your son? Irene's jaw set. Especially not my son. There was a pause, then Raymond replied, I'll begin the draft. You ready to shift the title? Irene looked out the kitchen window. Megan was pacing in the backyard on her phone, sunglasses perched high, gesturing wildly as if she were auditioning for a soap opera. Yes, she said quietly. Let's begin. Later that afternoon, Irene sat in her room, the second safe now hidden again beneath layers of old quilts and never-used luggage. The sun had begun to dip, casting a peach-colored hue across the hardwood. She could hear Megan in the hallway, arguing with Daryl about brunch seating. Ava's laughter floated from the den, light but tinged with something new, distance. As Irene sorted some old photographs into a donation box, Ava knocked on her door and peeked in. Need help? She asked. I'm just organizing, Irene replied, making room for history. Ava stepped in, noticing the faint scuff marks where Irene had moved the dresser earlier. Her eyes caught on the small gray safe sitting beside the foot of the bed, smaller than a shoebox, with a matte finish and no visible keypad. What's that? Ava asked. Irene looked down at it for a moment, then up at her granddaughter. History, she said softly. And leverage. Ava raised an eyebrow but said nothing, just nodded like someone who understood more than she let on. The safe stayed closed, but the door to something else had quietly swung open. The table was set with bone-white china and gold-trimmed glasses. Megan's special occasion set, rarely used but proudly displayed for events that reflected well on her. The smell of balsamic glaze and seared lamb floated through the house, covering the scent of bleach from an earlier cleaning frenzy. Laughter bubbled from the dining room, light and calculated. There were 4 chairs arranged, 2 on each side, one conspicuously empty at the head of the table, Irene's usual spot. From the staircase landing, Irene watched the scene like a ghost still tethered to a home she built. She gripped the banister and moved quietly, the carpet muffling her steps as Megan's voice rang out through the open floor plan. "She's safer upstairs, out of the way," Megan said with a snort, twirling a serving spoon like a baton. "We don't need a slip and sue during dessert." Daryl chuckled low, eyes flicking toward Ava, who didn't smile. "Let her rest," he added. "Big week." Ava looked toward the hallway. "She's not asleep. She doesn't need to be involved in everything," Megan said quickly, straightening the table runner. "This is about celebrating you, not managing her meds." Just then, the creak of the stair made all three of them turn. Irene stepped into view, wearing her navy cardigan and a pearl pin, one Megan had forgotten she hadn't stolen yet. "Evening," Irene said, voice calm, eyes unreadable. There was a pause. Megan smiled, too wide. "Oh, we didn't want to disturb you." "You didn't," Irene replied, taking the seat at the head of the table without waiting for permission. "But I thought I'd join, since it is my house." Ava looked down at her lap. Daryl adjusted his collar. Megan's smile faltered, then snapped back. "Of course, we just didn't think the stairs would be doable after last time." Irene poured herself a glass of water, her hands steady. "I manage fine when people don't leave me on the floor like a misplaced suitcase." Megan reached for the wine. "Well," she said brightly, "tonight's about Ava anyway. Big new job, benefits, bonuses, and fingers crossed, a relocation package." Irene turned to her granddaughter. "Proud of you." Ava met her eyes. "Thank you, Grandma." Daryl cleared his throat. "And since things are moving forward," he said, "we figured this would be the perfect time to, update the kitchen. Megan's got designs. More modern, something buyers would like. This place is a relic." Irene placed her fork down. "Just make sure the contractor sees the correct owner first." Megan froze. "Excuse me?" Irene tilted her head. "Ownership affects permits, doesn't it?" Daryl blinked. We've always assumed that you'd inherited it through proximity." Irene's smile was tight. "I suppose we're all learning new things this week." Ava's eyes darted between them. The rest of the dinner was quiet chewing and small talk, peppered with awkward glances and Megan's too loud laughs. Irene ate slowly, watching each bite land like a move in a chess match she already knew the ending to. Later that night, Megan was cleaning the dining room when Ava stepped into the hallway, holding a closed leather-bound planner with her mother's initials embossed on the front. "Where was this?" Irene asked. "Kitchen counter." It was open. Irene gestured for her to bring it over. Ava laid it on the bed between them and flipped to a tab marked Estate Notes. Inside were pages of lists, bracelets, necklaces, brooches, each described in detail, with estimated resale value ranges beside them. One column was labeled "Liquidate before probate." "She's cataloged everything," Ava whispered. "She thinks she's already won," Irene said, eyes scanning the ink like it was written in blood. Ava looked up. "What do we do?" Irene didn't answer right away. She reached for her phone and tapped Raymond's name. The line picked up after 2 rings. "Raymond," she said. "Confirm that the property rights are formally updated. I want all verbal inheritances voided." "They already are," he said smoothly. "Legally they have nothing." "Good," Irene whispered. "They shouldn't get to pawn what they never earned." Irene turned each page like peeling away layers of someone else's greed. The planner lay flat on her lap, its leather cover smelling faintly of Megan's perfume, something synthetic, overbearing, and too sweet to be honest. Each page was neatly organized, rows of item descriptions, hand-drawn jewelry shapes, prices beside them in neat blue ink. Gold hoop earrings, $480. Sapphire brooch, $1,100. Silver cuff, needs polish, still resellable. It wasn't just a list, it was an auction in waiting, a slow premeditated dissection of her life's artifacts. Irene exhaled, low and steady. Her hands didn't shake, not anymore. Ava sat across the room on the carpet, her legs crossed, biting the inside of her cheek. "This is insane," she said. She even wrote which consignment shops she'd use. "She's done this before," Irene murmured. Ava blinked. "What do you mean?" She catalogued her mother's estate before the poor woman's obituary even ran. Irene didn't elaborate further. She didn't need to. The silence between them was thick and knowing. That night, while Megan and Daryl were in the garage arguing over box placement for the brunch decor, Irene sat with Ava at the upstairs dresser, its surface covered with velvet-lined trays. Each held jewelry that spanned decades: wedding gifts, anniversary tokens, heirlooms from a time when things were given with love, not eyed like loot. Photograph only the pieces with provenance, Irene said, the ones with names, dates, stories. Ava held up a diamond pendant. Your wedding necklace, my husband's last real gift before the cancer. That one never leaves the house again. They worked quietly. The soft click of Ava's phone camera, the faint creak of Irene's rocking chair as she shifted. Outside, the dusk hummed with distant lawnmowers and cicadas. Inside, legacy was being reclaimed, one photo at a time. Once the last piece was documented, Irene placed the velvet trays inside the small gray safe, her real stronghold, the one neither Daryl nor Megan even knew existed. She pressed her thumb to the sensor and heard the familiar click. Secured. Now they can list and catalog all they want, she said softly. But what they think is valuable is already gone. Later that evening, Ava passed by the kitchen and saw Megan perched on a bar stool, hunched over her phone with a carefully practiced expression of thoughtfulness. A second later, a ping from Irene's phone upstairs echoed like a warning bell. She opened the post. A filtered throwback photo of Megan and Irene on the back patio last spring. Megan smiling like a saint. Irene mid-blink. Caption: so lucky to care for my beautiful Millel. She's given us so much. Hash family first, hash bless. Irene stared at it for a moment, then typed 4 words in reply. You won't be for long. It got 6 likes in 3 minutes. 1 angry face reaction. The next morning, Cora stopped by with a reusable grocery bag and a look of amusement on her face. I saw the post, she said, setting down cartons of blueberries and a bag of lemon tea. I figured you'd want to learn how to capture footage before she starts stage managing that too. Irene raised an eyebrow. Footage. Security cam. Cora tapped her phone. Front porch, back porch, all digital now. You just have to know how to send the clips. They sat side by side at the dining table, as Cora pulled up the app and walked Irene through it. Swipe. Save. Forward. Evidence at your fingertips. Why are you helping me? Irene asked after a while, glancing over. Cora shrugged. Because I watched my own sister die surrounded by people who wanted her gone. I didn't speak up then. I am now. The phone buzzed. A new text from Raymond. Trust fully revised. You now control 100% again. Irene let out a small, quiet breath. Not relief, not victory, just readiness. The only sound in Raymond's office was the pen dragging across paper, slow, deliberate, and final. Irene's signature flowed across the trust document, steady as ever. No second thoughts, no hesitations. It was the same hand that had signed marriage licenses, mortgage deeds, and birthday cards for a family that now stood on the other side of a legal wall she'd just built. When she lifted the pen, the weight in her chest shifted. Not gone, but redistributed. Like a suitcase packed for a long-delayed trip she was finally ready to take. Raymond gave a slow, satisfied nod. Ava is now the sole primary trustee. Executor remains with me. Full control remains with you, unless incapacitated. I'll never be that incapacitated, Irene said, meeting his eyes. He didn't smile, but there was approval in the way he stacked the documents with care. You've done more in 3 weeks than most people manage in a year. Most people don't fall at the feet of their own family and hear laughter. Raymond slid the folder into his briefcase and rose. Let me know the moment she asks for access. I'll be ready. She was ready too. 2 days later, Megan appeared in the hallway like a politician approaching a donor, too cheerful, too smooth. Hey, she said, drawing out the word like it was made of syrup. Quick question, no pressure, just, since everything's been so hectic, would you mind signing this for me? She handed Irene a stack of paper-clipped forms. The top one was labeled Durable Power of Attorney, Financial and Medical. For emergencies only, Megan added sweetly. We don't want to be scrambling if anything happens. Irene adjusted her glasses and squinted at the forms. I'll look them over later. Of course, Megan said, already reaching for a pen from her pocket. But it's pretty straightforward. I can walk you through it. Irene smiled faintly. I'll let you know when I find my pen. She placed the form on her nightstand next to an empty mug and left it there day after day untouched. That was the beauty of silence. It left space for suspicion to grow. You've always said this house was our future, Daryl murmured one morning over coffee, when Megan wasn't around. He looked older lately, like the years had finally noticed him. His voice held the same tentative warmth he used as a boy when asking for seconds at dinner. This house was always meant for us, for Megan and me. You said so. Irene stirred her tea, letting the spoon clink softly against the ceramic. Was it? She asked. I must have missed the paperwork. Daryl blinked. Come on, Mom. You know what I mean. No, she said calmly. I know what I signed. He didn't respond. That afternoon, while cleaning the guest room for visiting friends Ava claimed were just crashing overnight, Irene overheard voices from the hallway. Megan, she's dead weight with assets, she snapped. I'm sick of living like we're waiting for a funeral. Ava's voice quieter. Jesus, Mom. Irene froze mid-fold with a towel in her hands. Ava entered a moment later, eyes wide. She held up her phone. I got the whole thing. Irene nodded once. Forward it to Raymond. Label it Tone. Ava blinked. Seriously? Seriously. That evening, Cora arrived with a tiny box and a set of brass keys. Time for this, she asked. Irene led her to the hallway ere more. Together they opened the hidden jewelry cabinet, removed the old lock, and installed the new one. The tumblers clicked into place with satisfying precision. No more snooping? Cora asked. Not without a crowbar, Irene replied. As they cleaned up the tools, Cora paused. You ever feel scared? Irene looked at her, calm. I was. But now I'm awake. At 2:13 a.m., Irene's phone buzzed on the nightstand. She blinked herself awake, tapped the screen. Notification: unauthorized login attempt. Online banking account location. Columbus, Ohio's device. Unknown. Her heart didn't race. It slowed. She sat up, clicked the alert, and stared at the IP log. A browser session. Password failure. Retried. Twice. She looked out her bedroom window. The hallway was dark. But somewhere on the other side of it, someone had just crossed a line she wouldn't let them retreat from. The morning sunlight filtered through the blinds, soft and golden, but it touched a room colder than any winter night. Irene sat at the kitchen table with her tablet, glasses low on her nose, her teacup untouched. On the screen, the bank notification from the night before, and beneath it, a fresh email from Raymond. The subject line read simply, Drafted. She opened it. Inside, a formal cease and desist letter addressed to Megan Collier, citing unauthorized financial access attempts, breach of privacy, and notification of potential criminal investigation if repeated. Irene pressed print. The laser printer hummed low and steady, but the message it produced screamed with quiet fury. She slid the document into an envelope, sealed it, and wrote Megan's name on the front with a fountain pen. Ink, not pencil. Permanent. No room left for erasure. By noon, Megan was in the backyard, pretending to water plants she'd let die a month ago. Ava leaned against the patio post, holding her phone face twisted in disbelief. She really listed it, Ava muttered. She took a photo of your blue velvet box and uploaded it to some resale app. Said it was an estate piece. Which ring? Irene asked. The sapphire cabochon. The one with your initials engraved underneath. Irene didn't flinch. Delete it, then screenshot the draft. Timestamp it. She never even opened the safe, Ava said. How'd she? She doesn't need to open things, Irene replied. She just needs to pretend they're hers. That evening, Irene sat on the edge of her bed, brushing her thinning hair back into a low bun. Ava watched her from the doorway, silent. If I disappeared, Irene said suddenly, what would you do? Ava stiffened. What? Vanished. No note, no warning. I'd sue them. Ava answered without hesitation. Irene smiled, soft and faint. Let's stay a step ahead of that. The following morning, Cora arrived with a smart lock system tucked under her arm, like a weapon of war. We're installing it today, she said. No more borrowed keys. No more unlocked boundaries. They installed the device together. Irene's door was now controlled by a unique PIN, biometric access, and a mobile app that only she and Cora shared. No spares in the junk drawer. No loose copies floating in kitchen bowls or glove compartments. After the installation, Irene opened her front porch camera footage on her phone. With Cora's help, she had learned how to extract, store, and timestamp everything, and she had plenty now. Footage of Megan accidentally opening her mail, of her standing too long in front of Irene's bedroom door, with her phone flashlight on, of Daryl looking through desk drawers, while Irene was napping. It was no longer just suspicion. It was evidence. Later that night, Irene handed the sealed envelope to Megan at the kitchen counter, sliding it beside a bowl of lemons. What's this? Megan asked, manicured fingers already reaching. A boundary, Irene said. Megan opened it and read the header aloud. Cease and desist? You're joking. No. You're accusing me of theft? Megan snapped. Not accusing, Irene said, her voice like gravel under velvet. Just documenting. Megan's nostrils flared. You think this house protects you? This situation protects you? Irene looked at her without blinking. No, the law does. Megan's face twitched, but before she could speak again, Ava walked in from the hallway. Mom, she said. Low and warning. Megan turned on her, rage flashing. She's not dying fast enough. Silence fell. Ava stood still. Irene leaned back against the kitchen counter, and somewhere upstairs the smart lock clicked gently into place, unbothered and unbreakable. The ring light cast a soft, unnatural glow across Irene's face. Megan stood behind her phone, angling it just so, voice syrupy and insistent. Okay, smile this time, Irene. You look so much sweeter when you smile. Irene didn't. She sat in the sunroom's armchair, stiff-backed and silent. The warmth of the late afternoon sun spilled across her lap, but nothing softened the chill in her eyes. The camera clicked. Another photo. Another fake. Try again, Megan said through clenched teeth. This one's for the nursing partnership series. #caregivers. People love that crap. Ava stood near the kitchen archway, arms folded, eyes narrowed. I think we've got enough, she said. Megan ignored her. Come on, Irene. One where you look like I don't beat you. The click of the camera shutter felt like a slap in the silence. Irene turned her face slightly, chin high. Her lips didn't part. Her eyes didn't yield. She wasn't smiling, but she was speaking, just not with words. Later, Megan posted 3 photos with overly filtered backgrounds and saccharine captions. Being a caregiver isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. My beautiful Mel means the world. #grateful #family. First #elder care warrior. Within the hour, likes trickled in, mostly distant friends, old co-workers, women from the country club, who hadn't asked about Irene in years. Ava scrolled through the post from her room and shook her head. The phone in her hand buzzed. It was a new video. She'd recorded it just hours earlier, hidden between the kitchen island and the pantry door, Megan mocking the post aloud while editing. She means the world. Please. I should win an Oscar. My beautiful Mel, someone euthanize me. She laughed in the video. A sharp, brittle cackle. Ava stared at the screen, then opened her grandmother's Facebook account. Irene's wedding photo hadn't seen the light of day in years. She found it tucked in the bottom drawer, behind a half-empty jewelry pouch, and a birthday card from 1997. In the picture, she stood beside Harold, young, clear-eyed, beaming in front of the Collier house. The porch steps were newer then. her hair darker, but the frame of the house, the bones were unmistakable. She posted it. Still own the house in this picture. That was all. No hashtags, no filters. The comments came slowly, then faster. Old neighbors, church acquaintances, even a few of Megan's followers. Wait, don't you live with Megan now? Why did I think she inherited the house already? What's going on here? Megan noticed within minutes. She stormed into the living room, phone in hand, jaw tight. What the hell was that post? Irene didn't answer. She was crocheting, pale gray yarn, steady stitches. You made me look like a liar. Irene looked up. I didn't make you look like anything. That's the difference between photography and reflection. Megan lunged for the phone beside her, but Ava stepped in from behind. Don't touch her stuff. She's manipulating people. She's telling the truth, Ava snapped. Something you might want to try. You're siding with her now? I'm siding with facts. Megan's eyes darkened. Fine. If she can post, I'll just monitor what she posts. She reached for the phone again. Irene's voice cut cleanly across the air. Try to take my phone again, and I'll call the police this time, not the lawyer. Silence. Then Megan turned and left, heels clicking with venom. That evening, as the air cooled and the sun gave way to storm-colored skies, Irene sat in her room beside the window, sipping chamomile and watching the clouds roll in. Her phone rang. She picked it up on the second buzz. Raymond's voice was calm, but laced with energy. Offer received. Full cash. Closing flexibility. He paused. Shall we proceed? The real estate photographer's footsteps were silent, but the click of the shutter echoed like thunder in Irene's ears. Click. The sunlit foyer. Click. The newly polished hardwood. Click. The room where she'd once lain on the floor, ignored and insulted. Each photo captured not just the house, but the parts of her story she was reclaiming. She stood to the side as the woman worked, her hands folded over a cardigan buttoned all the way up. Ava stood behind her, arms crossed, lips pressed into a line. She hadn't smiled much lately, and Irene respected that. Grief and clarity often arrived together. Lighting's great today, the photographer murmured, angling toward the living room. No shadows. Irene looked past the camera lens, out the window toward the back patio, where Daryl had once promised to build her a rose garden. It never came. But shadows had always arrived on time. Only Cora and Raymond knew. The listing was private. No signs in the yard. No open houses. Viewings were scheduled with code words and brief windows. 5 potential buyers. 1 serial pretender. Ava had insisted on vetting the emails herself. Just in case someone gets nosy, she'd said. Now the house gleamed. Irene had scrubbed every cabinet, vacuumed every baseboard, buffed each faucet, until it glinted under the kitchen light. A lifetime of clutter had been reduced to clean, polished corners. Her movements were slow but methodical, her breath steady with every drawer she closed. To Megan, the sudden order was suspicious. That evening she circled the kitchen like a hawk, eyeing the shine on the counters and the absence of clutter. You nesting or something? Megan asked, sipping from a wine glass she hadn't washed in 3 days. Or should we be expecting a hospital bed and a chaplain? Irene didn't flinch. Just preparing. For what comes next. Megan snorted. That's what hospice patients say. Irene offered a serene smile. Then you should start being nicer. Later that night, Daryl tapped lightly on her door. I saw you moving things around earlier, he said. Ava said you've been signing things. Legal stuff. Irene nodded once, standing near the dresser. Are you? He hesitated, then tried a different tactic. Are you updating your will? She stared at him for a moment, letting the silence stretch. Then, would it matter? His face twitched. Of course it would. To who? He didn't answer. Down the hallway, Ava paused just outside the guest bedroom. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop. But then she heard it, Megan's voice, low and sharp. Make sure we get to it first. She hissed. To what? Daryl asked, his voice cracking with nervous energy. The papers, her files, her safe. I don't care. She's not going to blindside us. She's playing chess, and we're sitting here playing catch. Ava stepped back, heart thudding. She didn't push the door open, didn't demand an explanation. She simply pulled out her phone and hit record. The next day, Raymond called. Irene took the call outside on the porch, her feet resting on the welcome mat that hadn't welcomed anyone in years. "The serious buyer has confirmed," he said. "Full cash, flexible closing. They want a 30-day escrow and no contingencies." Irene let the wind move through her hair. A few birds chirped from the neighbor's maple tree. "And the timeline?" she asked. "They'll be ready to walk through as soon as you approve it. They'd like occupancy within 3 weeks of closing." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked out over the lawn, the one she used to weed by hand, the one Megan insisted looked better when outsourced. "It's time," she said. "Then I'll proceed." She ended the call. Ava stepped out moments later, sliding the screen door shut behind her. "Was that Raymond?" Irene nodded. "Closing in 30. Ava exhaled. "They won't see it coming." "No," Irene said. "But they will feel it when it lands." The papers were heavier than they looked. Irene sat in Raymond's downtown office, her cardigan draped neatly over the back of the chair, hands folded as she waited for the notary. The final page of the sale contract sat in front of her, initials already marked on every tab. "Occupancy requested within 3 weeks," Raymond said. "They're eager. All cash. No contingencies. This is as clean as it gets." Irene studied the signature line for a moment. "I raised a family in that house," she murmured. Raymond glanced at her, gentle. "And now you're writing your exit, on your terms." She picked up the pen and signed in 2 deliberate strokes. No trembling, no regret. The sound of the pen gliding across paper was crisp and final. She capped it. "And now it's no longer their roof to rot under." 3 days later, a thick manila envelope arrived in the mailbox addressed to current resident, but beneath that, in smaller text, "New owner documents enclosed." Megan tore it open like it was junk mail. At first she didn't understand. The title reference number, the buyer's legal name, a welcome note from the realty firm. Then her eyes widened. The color drained from her face like wine spilling across white linen. She stormed into the kitchen, letter in hand. Irene was quietly loading the dishwasher, Ava leaning against the fridge sipping iced tea. Megan slammed the papers on the counter. "What the hell is this?" Irene didn't look up. "Mail, I believe. This says someone bought the house." Irene closed the dishwasher door and wiped her hands calmly on a towel. "Someone did. You're bluffing." Irene met her eyes, slow and steady. "Am I? Check the title office. My name's no longer there." Megan stood frozen, her breath stuttering. You sold it? Without telling us?" "I didn't think squatters needed advance notice," Irene replied. Ava choked on her tea and turned away, hiding a small, stunned smile. That afternoon, Cora drove Irene to a small brick condo 2 streets over. Quiet cul-de-sac. 2nd floor. South-facing windows. The doormat read, "Good things take time." 2 bedrooms, Cora said, leading her in. Plenty of light, and no stairs. The scent of fresh paint still lingered in the air. The fridge hummed quietly. Irene walked slowly from room to room, her hand gliding across door frames, countertops, curtain rods. Everything felt untouched. Blank. Clean. "It's paid up," Cora added, "through the end of next year." Raymond handled escrow. "Keys are yours." Irene turned to her. "You really think I won't fall here?" Cora gave her a sideways look. "I think if you do, someone will actually help you up." Back at the old house, Ava began packing Irene's remaining things. She filled cardboard boxes with precision, jewelry trays first, then books, framed photos, a silk scarf still smelling faintly of lilac. Megan sat on the living room sofa, motionless, staring into a TV that wasn't turned on. Daryl hovered in the kitchen doorway, avoiding Ava's gaze, occasionally glancing at his phone, as if waiting for divine intervention. "You could help," Ava said once, holding out an empty box. Neither moved. "No?" She shrugged. "Didn't think so." That evening, as dusk spilled orange light across the kitchen tiles, Megan's phone rang. She answered on speaker. "This is Megan. Hi, this is Delaney from Keller and Reed," the woman said warmly. "Just calling to confirm our scheduled inspection for next week. The buyer will arrive Tuesday with their agent. We'll need the home accessible by 9 a.m. Megan's face froze. "What inspection?" "For the property," Delaney replied cheerfully. "The one that just closed. I'm living here." A pause. Then the agent, confused. "You're the seller?" "No," Megan snapped. "My mother-in-law." But Delaney had already moved on. "Just make sure someone's home to unlock the door." The line went dead. Ava stood in the hallway, arms crossed. "Well," she said, "I guess you'd better start packing." The sound of drawers slamming echoed like thunder through the quiet house. First the junk drawer in the kitchen, then the filing cabinet in the hallway, then the lockbox Megan had forgotten she never had the code for. Daryl's voice was tight with confusion. "There has to be a loophole. A delay. Some kind of there's nothing, Daryl," Megan shouted, waving a pile of envelopes. "Her name isn't even on the utilities anymore. The house is sold. We've been living in a dead woman's property, and she's not even dead." Daryl sank onto the edge of the couch, his hands gripping his knees. "But what do we do?" "Panic quietly," Ava said from the staircase. They turned to her, startled. She stood tall, arms folded, wearing her usual black hoodie, and no expression. "You made your bed," she said flatly. "Lie in it, for the next 7 days, until the new owners walk through that front door." Outside, the moving van's ramp groaned under the weight of Irene's final load: a cedar chest, 2 labeled boxes, and 1 framed photograph wrapped in soft fleece. She stood by the open garage door, watching as the movers strapped the last item down with quiet efficiency. The summer air smelled of mown grass and dust, the scent of endings. Cora stood on the curb, waving from behind her steering wheel. Her sunglasses reflected the house, now void of warmth and filled only with noise and unfinished arguments. "You ready?" she called out. Irene smiled, then turned back to the house one last time. Megan and Daryl stood in the doorway, arms crossed. Neither spoke. "I kept the only thing that mattered," Irene said, loud enough for them to hear. "My name." Then she climbed into the van and shut the door behind her. At 2:45 p.m., the doorbell rang. Megan opened it and came face to face with a sharply dressed woman holding a clipboard and a digital tablet. "Hi," she said. "Delaney, I'm the listing agent for the new buyers. We'll start our walkthrough now." Megan blocked the door. "You're early." "You're late," Delaney replied. Daryl appeared behind her, stammering. We weren't told the house was." "It's in the disclosure packet," Delaney said calmly. Irene signed. Raymond co-signed. "You're not on file. But we're living here." "You were," she said, stepping past them. "You have 7 days left." Megan didn't speak. Her face twitched, her jaw clenched. Delaney made a small note on her tablet and looked up. "It's cleaner than I expected," she remarked. "No sign of pets or damage. That'll help." Megan swallowed something bitter. "This is a mistake." A voice cut in from behind them, from the front porch. Only mistake was assuming silence meant surrender. They turned. Irene stood by the walkway, arms folded, watching them like a woman at her own memorial. Iva stood beside her. Delaney smiled. "Perfect timing. Miss Collier, anything else you'd like me to confirm with the buyer?" Irene shook her head. "Everything is already documented." Megan stepped forward. Her voice cracked. "You'll regret this." Irene tilted her head. "I don't even remember it." Then she turned and walked away. The front door swung shut behind her, its click louder than any slam. Irene's thumbprint sealed it. Raymond slid the final document across his polished desk, the signature already dry at the bottom. A small notary stamp hovered in the corner like a silent witness. The irrevocable trust of Irene M. Collier was now law. There was no revision, no reversal, no last-minute clause. What was written would outlive them all. Iva sat beside her, watching every stroke of the process with quiet reverence. She's the sole beneficiary, Raymond confirmed. Executor authority stays with me. No third-party challenges allowed. Probate proof. Watertight. Irene didn't smile, but she exhaled, long and slow, like she'd been holding her breath since the day Harold died. The letters were tucked in navy envelopes, each one dated and labeled. Ava's had a purple ribbon. Cora's was wax-sealed in red. There were recipe cards, handwritten in Irene's looped script. No digitals, because screens don't smell like cinnamon, she said. Some included notes in the margins. Harold liked this one with extra nutmeg. Don't skip the butter. Life's too short. She recorded short voice memos too. Nothing long. Just pieces. If you're hearing this, then I'm not gone. I'm just not at dinner. Don't let them say I was confused. I was tired. There's a difference. Legacy wasn't gold. It was voice sent, stories, instructions written in ink and love. 2 days later, Megan tried her last card. She marched into the county office with a folder of selectively edited photos, an embellished timeline, and a story she'd rehearsed in front of her phone camera for 3 hours. She's being manipulated by an outsider. She's vulnerable. She changed her legal documents under duress. The county worker blinked at her. And who's the duress? My daughter, and the neighbor, and the lawyer. The woman behind the glass raised an eyebrow. So, a retired nurse, a practicing elder law attorney, and your adult daughter are all in on some conspiracy to steal her china? Megan stiffened. Her assets. The file was flagged for review, but it never left the desk. That evening, Megan received a call. Your report has been reviewed. No further action will be taken. Cora wrote the letter by hand. It ran 3 pages, printed in the Columbus Weekly the following Sunday under the title Let Her Stand. I've known Irene Collier for 30 years. She is not confused. She is not frail. She is not anyone's bargaining chip. She is a woman who stood up after being discarded by her own blood and made decisions with clarity, purpose, and dignity. That should be honored, not questioned. The editor added a short italicized postscript. The writer is a retired registered nurse and lifelong resident of Franklin County. That same day, the paper ran a sidebar. Elder took back control from her own family. Legal win raises awareness on senior rights. The article included a quote from Raymond Lynn. Too often people assume proximity equals entitlement. This case shows what can happen when foresight meets resilience. Irene clipped the page and folded it into her memory box, right next to her first ultrasound of Daryl. In the kitchen of the condo, Ava wrapped her arms around Irene and buried her face into the cotton of her sweater. This is the future you deserved, she whispered. Irene gently patted her back. No, this is the one I earned. A knock echoed at the door of the old house, sharp, official. Megan opened it with dread in her throat. The courier handed her a white envelope with a gold seal and a single sheet inside. Notice of eviction, full occupancy required. Vacate in 5 business days. Megan's hands trembled. Daryl stepped beside her. What is it? He asked. She didn't answer, just crumpled it slowly in her fist. The first night in the condo was quiet enough to hear the heater hum. Irene stood barefoot on the kitchen tile, a warm cup of peppermint tea in her hands, watching the glow of a single lamp stretch across hardwood. She didn't need to share. The place smelled of fresh paint and lemon oil. Her books were neatly stacked on the windowsill, her afghan draped over the arm of the sofa. A vase of hydrangeas sat on the table, not from a florist, but clipped that morning from Cora's yard. No arguments, no passive sighs, no one rearranging her silverware, just space and breath. The new street was tree-lined and forgettable in the best way. No one here asked questions, and no one came knocking. They never even asked how she got here, so she made sure they couldn't follow. Every Wednesday at 4 o'clock, Ava showed up with a bag of croissants and something new in her eyes, relief mostly, but also a kind of reverence that hadn't existed in the house they'd left behind. Want to go over the tapes again? She joked once, holding up her phone. Only if I can rate your camera angles, Irene replied. Smirking, they sat on the balcony together, sipping tea and laughing in low tones, trading stories about Harold's terrible dance moves at weddings, Ava's first broken heart, the time Irene forged her own permission slip to sneak out and surprise Harold at a bowling alley. She hadn't told that story in 50 years. It still made her grin. Legacy wasn't what you left behind. It was who you stayed alive in. On a quiet Saturday, Irene packed a box with her own hands, 2 pearl necklaces, 1 opal ring, 3 vintage scarves, a gold charm bracelet, and a handwritten note. For the next woman who forgets she's allowed to keep something for herself. Cora helped her deliver it to the women's shelter in German village. No photos, no press, just a small act Irene wished someone had done for her when she was young and scared and stuck. 3 days later, Megan showed up. She never made it past the front gate. The security guard leaned against the call box, chewing gum, watching Megan with the detached amusement of someone used to entitled arguments. "I'm her daughter-in-law," she snapped. "She'll want to see me." He didn't even look up. "Name's not on the list." "She's confused." Megan hissed. "You don't know her like I do." "Good thing," he muttered, buzzing the call box again. "Collier, you have someone here. You want me to send her up?" Irene's voice came through, steady and smooth. "No, not today. Not ever." The line clicked. The gate remained closed. Megan stood there for a few seconds longer before turning on her heel and storming back to the car. She didn't notice Ava watching from her parked sedan across the street. That evening, Raymond called. "All done," he said. "Trusts filed. Estate clean. Will updated. Accounts secured. The name Collier is protected." Irene stirred honey into her tea. "They're out? They're ghosts, legally speaking. You're safe." She didn't reply right away. The silence was enough. 2 weeks later, Ava's department at the Ohio History Center threw a celebration for a grant she'd won, her first solo submission fully funded. Irene showed up in a gray trench coat, a silk scarf, and the same brooch she'd worn to Ava's high school graduation. No one clapped louder when Ava stepped to the podium. No one smiled harder when Ava thanked her grandmother by name. As guests milled about the reception, Cora leaned over and handed Irene a ginger ale. "You ever think it'd end like this?" she asked. Irene tilted her head, considering. "They thought you fell," Cora added, eyes soft. "But you rose." Irene sipped her drink and looked around the crowded room at Ava laughing, at colleagues shaking hands, at the bright new space she never thought she'd get to see. "No," she whispered. "But I think I like this ending better." They expected her to fade, not stand at a podium under fluorescent lights, clearing her throat before a silent crowd of seniors. Irene adjusted her bifocals and looked out at the folding chairs lined in rows at the Columbus Senior Resource Center. Some held canes, others, notebooks. A few wore the same stiff politeness she'd once worn at parties Megan forced her to attend, but now, the attention was real. Not pity, not obligation, just people listening. "Estate safety," she began, "isn't just about protecting money, it's about protecting your dignity." No one moved. "My name is Irene Collier." Some of you might have seen a certain newspaper article that earned a few nods. One man chuckled softly. "I'm here because I learned late in life that silence can cost more than a signature, and I decided to speak before they wrote me off." Hands scribbled. Phones recorded. One woman in the second row cried, just once, then wiped her cheek with her scarf. Later that afternoon, Ava sat on Irene's condo balcony, eyes narrowed at her phone screen. "They filed an appeal," she muttered. "Megan and Daryl begging for more time." Irene stirred her tea. "Let me guess. Emotional hardship and sudden displacement." Ava turned the screen toward her. "And a handwritten note from Daryl about how her actions fractured a family and left us homeless." "They fractured themselves," Irene said. "I just stepped aside and let the cracks show." Ava scrolled. "Wait, here's the verdict." She tapped, then read aloud. "Eviction upheld. No grounds for delay. New owner has full right of entry within 48 hours. She lowered the phone. "That's it." Irene only nodded, then reached for her notebook. "Time to update my medical proxy," she said softly. "I've been meaning to correct that." Raymond's office was cool and smelled faintly of cedar and old carpet. Irene handed him a single sheet of paper. Remove Daryl. Add Cora. Final, she said. Raymond looked over the form. You sure? He's afraid to make decisions even with dinner menus. Imagine life support. That earned a rare smile from Raymond. He filed the form immediately. As they stood to leave, he handed Irene a small velvet box and a sealed envelope. This was dropped off for Ava. Said it was from you. I asked you to hold it until everything's settled. Irene said. It's time. Ava sat cross-legged on the rug of her apartment that evening, the box in her lap, hands hovering above it like the lid might burn. She opened it slowly. No diamonds, no sapphires, no heirloom cufflinks. Inside was a single brass key, slightly dulled from time, and 5 Polaroids photos of the house. One of the kitchen island, one of the upstairs window view, one of the backyard where Irene once taught Ava how to spot cardinals. The note read, "This was never about the ring. It was always about respect. You saw me when no one." That's what legacy looks like. Ava pressed the box to her chest and didn't speak for a long time. The next day, Irene walked the long hallway of her condo building and found something unexpected in her mail slot. No return address. Slanted cursive. A single page. She opened it slowly. I wasn't fair. I wasn't kind. You didn't deserve what we gave you. I don't know what to say anymore. No name, no signature. But the Lupin dimples, the trailing U's sorry, the heavy dotting of each I. Irene had seen it all before. On birthday cards she never asked for. On thank you notes written post-holiday but pre-return. She folded the letter once neatly and placed it beside her window orchid. Megan had finally written, but it was too late for apologies. She didn't want revenge anymore. She had something better, a witness. The catalog sat open on Irene's lap, page corners softened by her careful hands, though the paper itself still carried Megan's scent, cheap perfume and entitlement. Each page detailed her belongings like they were product lines. Turquoise ring, moderate wear, appraised $2,600. Pearl earrings worn at wedding, resale possible, a state discount. The notes weren't sentimental, they were transactional, calculated, void of memory, heart, or history. She glanced at her own list on the table beside her, her counter inventory, a teacup set, donated to a shelter for young mothers. The opal brooch, given to a former student of Harold's who now taught 4th grade in the same school district. The white gold pendant from her 40th anniversary, still in her safe, but staying with Ava. Irene had made peace with letting things go. It wasn't about what left her hands. It was who she gave them to. She picked up Megan's pages one last time. No hesitation now. She rose, walked slowly to the small fireplace in her condo's living room, and dropped the sheets in like dry leaves. The ink curled, the edges blackened, and the paper split down the spine as it turned to ash. Her items were never for sale. Not really. Not to people who hadn't earned the stories attached to them. Behind her, Ava snapped the clasp on a new scrapbook. Finished, she said, placing it on the table. But don't open it yet. It's your birthday gift. I told you I didn't want anything. Ava smiled. It's not a gift, it's a record, one you actually belong in. Irene raised a brow. Let me guess. I'm the only one pictured. Ava grinned. Exactly. You're the center of every photo. I deleted every trace of them. Irene looked at her, warmed by something far deeper than the room's temperature. You know, she said, there are parts of you that remind me of who I might have been, if I hadn't spent so much time accommodating. I got that from watching what you stopped doing. Ava replied. That night, Cora dropped by with something bundled in tissue paper and yarn. I thought this would take me until Christmas, she said, handing the package over. But apparently anger is great motivation. Irene peeled back the layers to reveal a knitted throw blanket, impossibly soft, deep blue, with interwoven strands of forest green and cream. Cora smirked. For someone with warmth, not someone who fakes it. Irene folded it across her lap. I'll never buy another. Good. This one's meant to outlast the rest. The next morning was her birthday. No balloons, no streamers, just a small table set for three. Ava arrived first, carrying a bakery box and a thermos of lavender tea. Cora followed with a bouquet of wild flowers, and exactly one candle for the cake. No numbers, no years. They toasted with mismatched teacups, laughed about Megan's last social media post, which had 4 likes, 2 of them bots. They read poetry. Ava played a voicemail. Harold had left years ago, recovered from an old answering machine. It was grainy but perfect. Irene didn't cry. She didn't need to. She felt something rarer than grief. She felt witnessed. Later, after the guests had left, and the dishes were drying in the rack, her phone buzzed once. Message from Daryl. Happy birthday, Mom. Can we talk? She stared at the screen, then calmly blocked the number. She didn't delete it, but she didn't owe it air. That evening she sat at her desk and pulled out the last box, a simple wooden one with brass hinges. Inside she placed a sealed envelope marked Final Will, Ava only. She added one item more, the brass key Ava had returned to her last month, now tied with a velvet ribbon, not to be used, just to be held. Then she closed the lid, clicked the latch shut, and pressed her palm over the wood. The safe was small, matte black, and cool to the touch. It sat on the kitchen counter like a quiet sentinel, unassuming but built to outlast fire, water, theft, and time. Its interior was lined with foam, soft as felt, and it waited open like a final gesture ready to be made. Irene stood before it in her robe, hands steady, lips pressed thin. The condo was silent except for the ticking of the wall clock and the hum of the fridge. Outside, light rain slicked the windows, softening the world beyond the glass. She slid in the documents one at a time, measured, intentional. First her living will, signed and notarized. Next the full trust agreement, naming Ava as sole beneficiary and successor trustee. Then the final property records of the house she once called home, sold, sealed, irreversible. And last a handwritten letter folded twice, edges worn from being read and reread. She placed it at the top like a ribbon on a gift. It read, Ava, they wanted the house, the jewelry, the name. I gave you something bigger, room to be decent in a world that profits off cruelty. Legacy isn't jewels. It's justice with witnesses. I didn't fall alone. I rose because someone saw me. She closed the lid slowly, pressed her thumb to the biometric lock, and heard the soft click of it sealing shut. Then she picked up a Sharpie and wrote in clear block letters across the top, AVA only. Do not open unless needed. The ink bled slightly into the metal, but it held. Ava arrived 10 minutes later, raincoat damp, breath fogging in the cool air as she stepped inside. It's ready, Irene said, nodding to the safe. Ava looked at it, then her. Is this everything? Everything that matters, Irene replied. And nothing they'll ever find in a will contest. Ava lifted the safe with both hands. It was heavier than expected, dense with consequence. She didn't cry. Not exactly. But something tightened in her throat as she cradled it like something fragile. You okay? Irene asked. Ava smiled through misty eyes. No breakdown, just awe. That's how it should be. Ava carried the safe to her car like she was walking across a stage. Her coat flapped behind her in the wind. She didn't look back until the hatch clicked shut. From the window, Irene watched it all. Later, as the afternoon light shifted golden against the condo's clean walls, Irene sat in her reading chair by the window, sipping tea that had gone cool without her noticing. Her gaze landed on the framed photo above the bookshelf, a new one Ava had surprised her with. It was them, from Ava's work celebration. Irene upright, wearing her brooch. Ava beside her, shoulder to shoulder, both of them beaming, not just smiling but beaming. That picture now replaced the old family portrait from years before, the one where Megan had stood in the middle and insisted on retakes until she looked thinner. This new photo didn't demand perfection. It just told the truth. She looked out at the parking lot, slick with rain. Somewhere out there, Megan was likely ranting to no one. Daryl was shrinking behind her, and the house that started it all, was now being lived in by someone who didn't know its full history. Let them walk its halls, let them repaint the kitchen, let them sit where she once fell. That floor was no longer her problem, and yet, it had built her foundation. She reached for her tea, finally took a sip. Cold, but it didn't matter. The warmth was elsewhere now, wrapped in letters tucked into safes, held by someone who understood the weight of what was left behind. Outside, the rain slowed. Inside, Irene smiled. They laughed when I fell, but I was the one who stood with the last word.